Shalom everybody and all VFI News supporters. I'm going to open up by reading a scripture to all of you as we've entered Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles as it's known. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of this 7th month, and for 7 days, is the Feast of Booths to the Lord. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. For 7 days you shall present food offerings to the Lord. And on the 8th day you shall hold a holy convocation and present a food offering to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall not do any ordinary work. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim as times of holy convocation." And so, folks, that's exactly what we're doing as a family. We're going to eat and rejoice, despite the fact that this has been a difficult week in Israel, once again with the joy of the high holidays mixed with the anguish we've suffered as a result of multiple terrorist attacks and casualties from the ongoing conflict. As I'm filming this, we're already into the Sukkot holiday, and we're all wondering when and how hard Israel will strike Iran in retaliation for the ballistic missile attack 2 weeks ago. All that and more is just ahead on this week's edition of VFI News. In southern Lebanon, the IDF is doing amazing work, finding and destroying many of the tunnels that Hezbollah warned would be impregnable fighting positions from which they would wage relentless war on the IDF. Hundreds of Hezbollah combatants or terrorists have been killed in battle with the IDF, while the IDF has suffered casualties as well, mostly from a drone strike, though, on a dining hall at their base on Sunday evening. By the way, Bati and I were eating at that dining hall only 1 month ago visiting the troops. That attack killed 4 soldiers, all just 19 years old, and wounding dozens more. This is the most serious blow Hezbollah has managed to land on Israel in this war, and as bad as it is, it's nowhere near as bad as what we were warned would happen. In fact, according to the latest numbers I have available, 43 Israeli soldiers and other members of the security services have been killed by Hezbollah since this war began, and 30 civilians have also been killed. Many more Israelis have been wounded, and I'll ask you to join me in praying for their recovery. However, once again, this is a tiny fraction of the number of casualties we were warned would likely be inflicted on Israel in the event of a major outbreak of hostilities. Again, our hearts go out to all those who have lost loved ones during this whole conflict. In addition to that, the Israel Tax Authority published numbers this week saying they've already paid out around 1.5 billion shekels in compensation for damage caused to property during this war, and they expect to pay about another 1 billion shekels when residents of northern communities return to their homes or apartments in the north. Friends, 2.5 billion shekels might be a lot of money for ordinary taxpayers like you and me, but in the grand scheme of things, it's chicken feed. Compared to the amount of damage we were told we could expect from Hezbollah's firing of thousands of rockets a day into our country, it's less than that. What I'm trying to say here, friends, is that this war is going much better for Israel than anyone expected so far, and I know why. It's because of the prayers of people like you and me that moved God to supernaturally protect us and fight for us. He that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He watches and guards over Israel. So please do not stop praying, because it does work, and it's actually the only thing that works together with our military and security services. I have nothing but love and respect for the IDF, the Shin Bet, Border Police, Magen David Adom, Hatzalah, fire brigades, and all the other people and organizations who are on the front lines defending me and my family and taking care of all of us, both Jewish and Arab Israelis alike. But the truth is that we must humbly give thanks to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the Bible, whose feasts we're marking this week and next, for the fact that things are going as well as they have been. Now, speaking of things going well, on the other side of the equation, Hezbollah is assessed to have lost almost 2,500 killed and nearly 4 times that number wounded. That number includes their longtime leader, Big Mouth Hassan Nasrallah, and most of his senior deputies, as well as dozens of mid-level field commanders and operatives. Hezbollah has suffered immense material losses as well, including more than half of the rockets, missiles, and UAVs they had when the war started, according to the latest IDF estimates. They've also lost hundreds of vehicles, buildings, bunkers, and last but not least, tunnels. And to add to that, with the cherry on top of the sundae, lots of money. Getting back to those tunnels, the IDF posted videos of one such tunnel they uncovered on Monday. It was 800 meters long, dug into the bedrock 10 meters below the surface. It was located just 3 kilometers from the Israeli border, and not to be funny, but it kind of reminds me of the fraternity houses I saw some of my friends living in. Well, it had kitchens and showers, bunk beds in the small side rooms, a TV room, and other recreational facilities, internet hookups, and all kinds of other stuff, like a 5-star hotel. There was enough canned food and water in the bunker for hundreds of Hezbollah terrorists to be able to stay down there for weeks. And again, just like a frat house on a college campus, the walls were covered with posters of their favorite celebrities. But instead of movie stars and musicians, all the posters in this frat house were their dear leader, Hassan Nasrallah. Bye-bye. Of course, the other thing that this tunnel was packed full of was weapons and ammunition to be used in attacks on Israeli communities in the Galilee and the Golan, just like the attacks Hamas carried out against the Gaza envelope communities on October 7, 2023. Now, in nearby buildings, the IDF found motorcycles and other vehicles that these guys were supposed to use to charge the border, which, as I said before, was just 3 kilometers away. But all of this raises a question about what happened to these Hezbollah fighters that were supposed to be in these tunnels. The IDF says that there was ample evidence that they were there until very recently, as some of the bread and cheese they found in the refrigerators was just beginning to get moldy. I hope it wasn't too moldy. Well, according to one Hezbollah fighter who surrendered to the IDF, many of the fighters who were manning those tunnels and other defensive positions that Hezbollah had set up in southern Lebanon to repel an Israeli ground incursion have simply run away like mice after the news broke that Hassan Nasrallah, whatever his name is, had been taken out in an Israeli airstrike. Now, I would caution that this is just the testimony of a single individual terrorist, and even if he's telling the truth, there are all kinds of things he probably doesn't know about. So we shouldn't take what he said at face value, and we shouldn't become arrogant and overconfident. But it certainly does track with some other things we're seeing. In a broader sense, the fact that not only Nasrallah, but most of his senior deputies and many of the higher and even mid-level field commanders have been taken out of circulation in the last few weeks might explain why Hezbollah is performing so poorly on the battlefield. Again, we should never take anything for granted, though. Hezbollah is many things: a terrorist organization and a political party and a social welfare organization for those lucky enough to be on their good side. But above all else, it's a cult. I hope no one watching these videos has ever had the experience of being trapped in a cult, but I've read a few books about this sad phenomenon, and I can tell you a few things about it. For one, the leader of a cult is never wrong. He never makes a mistake. He never uses poor judgment, etc. If something goes wrong, it's never his fault. It's always the fault of some incompetent and/or treacherous subordinate. Or maybe there's a conspiracy of people out to take him down because they're jealous of his greatness, or they don't understand his genius, or whatever. Above all else, the leader of the cult is invincible, if not immortal, and the victory of his vision is inevitable. Well, the death of Hassan Nasrallah, who led Hezbollah for 30 years, must have come as a great shock to his followers, as the death of any cult leader, always to those who follow him, are pretty much depressed now. Now they're demoralized, disorganized, and unsure what to do next. Many probably are running away, throwing away their Hezbollah uniform, putting on civilian clothes, and trying to join the throngs of refugees fleeing the war. Many others are, for all intents and purposes, seeking escape through suicidal confrontations with IDF troops, trying to go out in a blaze of glory and hoping to take a few of the hated enemies with them. The IDF reports that they've eliminated hundreds of Hezbollah terrorist fighters in the past few weeks, often engaging in violent shootouts at very close range. It's a miracle that so few IDF troops have been killed or wounded in these exchanges of fire, and once again, I'll ask you to keep praying for our IDF soldiers and for this war to be over quickly so that we can get on with the project of rebuilding, both here and I'm sure amongst the Lebanese people they'd like to do the same. Now, as I've said before, there's been about 2.5 billion shekels worth of property damage in Israel so far since the war began, and there is likely to be much more before it's over. I want to take a moment to talk about this subject of money. And if anyone thinks I'm being inappropriate by talking about that, let me remind you that it is one of the main topics in the Bible, almost more than any single topic. So with that in mind, can you imagine how much money it cost Hezbollah to build all these tunnels and bunkers? Waste. How much did it cost them to fill them with weapons and ammunition, furniture and canned food, and then hook them up to electrical and water supplies? What a waste. So a platoon of Hezbollah goons could hang out in them comfortably? And what were they waiting there for? But for the day when they were meant to grab their rifles and grenades, mount their motorcycles, and charge across the Israeli border to murder, rape, burn, and destroy our Israeli citizens. Lebanon has been in a severe economic crisis for years, with many of its residents living in poverty. The government is often unable to provide basic services like garbage collection and maintenance of public spaces. Hezbollah claims to be providing many services the government doesn't provide, but the whole world can now see where most of their money was spent. Speaking of their money, reports have begun to emerge that even Hezbollah is running low on money. May they go bankrupt, as Israel has bombed many of the banks in Lebanon where they kept their cash. That's an interesting way to fight a war, isn't it? Israel has also contributed towards a quiet alliance with Jordan and Saudi Arabia to thwart the flow of Captagon and other narcotics through Lebanon to the rest of the Arab countries in the region that Hezbollah used to finance its operations. Hezbollah is heavily involved in narcotics trafficking and other illegal activities all over Africa and Latin America, and it's long past time for this side of them to be publicized and pushed back against. If anyone still thinks Hezbollah is a brave, noble band of freedom fighters battling against the colonialism of Israel or whatever other delusions people have talked themselves into believing, it's time to wake up and smell the coffee. Oh, I'd like a cup. They're an evil cult of death, murder, narcotics, and human trafficking that Israel is doing the whole world a big favor by demolishing. Doing you a favor in Lebanon. Now, before we move on, I have one more point to make about money. Candidly, friends, we need your money here in Israel. Despite the good news on the kinetic war front, there is a great deal of bad news on the economic front. Israel's credit rating has been slashed by all the major rating agencies, and several large projects which were planned to be built here by major corporations have been put on hold or canceled altogether. Major sectors of Israel's economy, including tourism, of course, but also agriculture, are almost completely shut down. The government has had to spend enormous amounts of money on war-related expenses, including the weapons and ammunition the soldiers need to fight with, but also paying salaries for reserve soldiers who have been mobilized, paying unemployment and health benefits for evacuated civilians, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. The finance ministry has already published its proposed budget for 2025, and it paints a grim picture. Many social welfare benefits are going to need to be cut, taxes are going to have to be raised, etc. Millions of Israelis are already in a difficult economic situation, and it's not going to get easier for anyone for a long time. And so that's why I'm asking you to visit our website, visionforisrael.com, and click on the Projects tab. There you'll see some of the ways we're trying to be a blessing to the people of Israel during this time of trouble. I've said this many times over the past year, but I'll say it again, that we've been in operation for 30 years plus now, and we've helped a lot of people in that time. In fact, hundreds of thousands of people. But now we are needed more than ever before. The situation for the entire population of Israel is critical for many people. It's already moved beyond critical and become desperate. So please visit visionforisrael.com and click on the Projects tab. Now getting back to the news, and since we're drawing close to the end of the program, I'll just hit some of the big stories and make some brief comments. There have been several terrorist attacks and attempted attacks in Israel over the past week. On Tuesday, a Palestinian man walked up a road junction on Highway 4 near the city of Ashdod and opened fire, killing a police officer and wounding 4 other people before an armed civilian shot him dead. This is the kind of thing every Israeli knows could happen at any time and at any place. And it's the reason so many have acquired a license to carry a handgun over the past year. Sadly, many people in other countries are coming to the conclusion that they should do the same thing. And where it's legal for them to do so, we see rising numbers of civilians arming themselves. I'm old enough to remember when you could walk around most European and North American cities in broad daylight and even after dark and not have to worry so much about being the victim of a violent attack. It's very sad for me to see that changing so quickly, but I also hope that people living in these countries will have a little bit more sympathy and understanding for Israelis who have been living with this reality for a very long time. Moving on to events in the Gaza Strip, I wish I could tell you that the war there is winding down, but the fact is that Hamas terrorists still has some young men who are deluded enough to be willing to fight for this cause that's already being lost. The IDF has had to move in once again to the northern Gaza city of Jabalia, evacuating the residents to tent cities further south. As winter approaches, it's getting more and more critical to build shelters for these poor people that will protect them from the rain and cold. If you think Israel is a hot place where it never rains, much less snows, you're wrong. The winters here get very cold, and at Vision for Israel, we're already making plans to help people stay warm this coming winter. Now, the people of Gaza are going to need a lot of help too, and it's very unhelpful for Hamas to continue fighting the IDF and preventing other civilians in the Palestinian-controlled areas from fleeing the combat zones, so they can get to places where they will be possibly able to be taken care of by some agency somewhere. But Hamas has never ever pretended to care about the ordinary people of Gaza, and we shouldn't be surprised about that anymore. So it would be best if Hamas lays down its weapons, surrenders totally, or gets destroyed, because other agencies need to get in there and help the people in the Gaza Strip. Now, there's one other thing to report about this situation in Gaza, and that is that Israel is being blamed for the lack of humanitarian aid that is making its way to these civilians. The IDF has said that aid often gets stolen by Hamas, and that's prolonging this war, but the UN, or United Nothings, and other aid agencies operating in the Strip say that's irrelevant. Aid must be allowed to get through anyways. The Biden administration in the United States agrees with them, and this week they issued a warning to Israel that if this isn't sorted out in 30 days, they'll start cutting back on supplies of weapons and ammunition. I probably don't have to tell you what I think about that, friends, and what that signals to our enemies. Well, it's an utterly outrageous situation, but Israel will probably back down to the Biden administration's demands because the war against Hezbollah and Iran is a much higher priority at this point than the war against Hamas. Hamas has unquestionably been removed as the strategic threat to Israel, and we need the United States to help to deal with the Hezbollah and Iranian issues, which still are strategic threats, although the threat from Hezbollah has been greatly diminished. And that sets up the conclusion of this week's report, which is all about Iran. Bam, 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 Iran. Oops, sorry. Ever since Iran launched its ballistic missile attack against Israel on October 1st, the whole world has been holding its breath to see what Israel would do in response. Many players, including the United States and Europe, but also China and Russia, the Gulf Arab states, and India, have made their thoughts known to Israel about what they'd like us to do or not to do, and above all else, what targets they'd rather we didn't hit. That's weird. That discussion has gotten so absurd, I don't even want to make a comment on it. Iran has also made many of their usual threats about what will happen if Israel does this, that, or the other. I'm not a great military strategist, but I candidly believe that Iran's leaders realized they made a big mistake, and now they're hoping they don't pay too high a price for it. They also know they can't do much to Israel in response to our response, despite all their huffing and puffing and blow the house down. Although Israeli officials have promised a serious response and said over and over again that it is coming soon, there appears to be a strategy of making the Iranians wait, guess, and eventually drop their guard. At that point, they will be very vulnerable, and that's probably when Israel will strike. As I've said before, this might also be something that's being delayed until after the Feast of Tabernacles, because you know how many of us love to celebrate the feast. And just like many other things in Israel, get put off until after the feast every year. Speaking of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, you know, by the way, it's a holiday of joy. It's all about joy. And it has already started, and so we're celebrating in Israel with the family and eating lots of good food and sitting under the booth, or the Feast of the Tabernacle. That's what it's all about. I have a lot of things to do, so I got to get going, and that's why I've spent all this time with you, so I can keep you in touch with reality on the ground. So wherever you are, I hope you're getting into this festival of Sukkot. And so until next week, I'm Barry Siegel, and this has been another edition of the VFI News from Israel. Shalom, everybody. I love you.